Welcome back to Alchemical Astrology, my fellow cosmic dancers. I'm Melusine, your celestial traffic reporter with the November transits for 2022. I waited to record this until after the lunar eclipse, and you'll find out why, as Mars, Mercury, and the Moon factor large in this month's most significant aspects, none of which are particularly easy to negotiate, until we have Jupiter going direct on November 23rd and Venus, Mercury, and the Sun ingress into Sagittarius on the 16th, 17th, and 22nd. What I'd like you to note overall is that the month of November is like a cosmic bookend to October, mirroring similar tensions and patterns, but in this case, all the difficult angles are playing out in the first half of the month, to be followed by a precious point in time we can all collectively pause and take a moment to regroup, charge our batteries, and initiate future plans with some assistance from both benefics. I may be sounding like a broken record to my viewers at this point by constantly emphasizing the importance of what has felt like a perpetual Saturn square Uranus vibe, but this aspect is still dictating the tone of the overall energies of the month and has been echoing themes that were in the forefront during the 1960s when Saturn was opposing Uranus and Pluto. Revolution, resistance, and social reform swept the world stage and shaped the culture of a new generation. The same thing is happening now and was triggered yet again in 2020 by Saturn conjuncting Pluto and squaring Uranus. The lunar eclipse on November 8th will serve as the midnight chime of the sky clock when it comes to this long-standing tango between the outer planets, so rest assured there is finally relief in sight. It will take a few years before the dust settles and we have the benefit of 2020 hindsight to look back on these same gears shifting in the 21st century and how they imprinted on humanity's evolution. A magnificent reference for those of you interested in doing further research is Richard Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyche. It is one of my treasures in my personal astrological reference library, and I will leave a link to it in the show notes. While we're looking in the rearview mirror, those of you old enough to have had grandparents who lived through the Roaring Twenties will certainly have heard stories about the Prohibition years and the resistance against restrictions imposed by authorities. Hedonistic attitudes were embraced with enthusiasm, and this exuberance was reflected in pervasive get-rich-quick schemes thanks to a 75-day Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in 1920. However, this would come to a crashing halt with Wall Street plummeting on October 29th of 1929, followed by the Great Depression. Jupiter squared Pluto in 1922 and then Uranus in 1924, which saw the rise of Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini. The Weimar Republic formed on November 9, 1918, after the Kaiser's abdication, and early on in its inception the German Reich was faced with hyperinflation, political extremism, and mounting tensions with France and Belgium after the First World War. The peak of the economic crisis in November of 1923 led to the price of a loaf of bread soaring from $1,200 to $2 million, and finally $3 billion, at which point the Deutschmark collapsed. When people decide to spend their money as quickly as they earn it, assuming its value is declining that rapidly, then we will be revisiting the same situation. And there are definitely signs of this based on how much currency is being circulated at the moment. As far as the scandal that is brewing with respect to crypto giant FTX collapsing, all I will say is, remember Enron, and who was Bernie Madoff? If ever there was a perfect example of Uranus playing out its shock treatment in Taurus, this couldn't be more evident. Currency crisis in the technological arena. This is the state of affairs on the mundane level and needs to be addressed, so we don't repeat history. And if you hadn't noticed, all the dates I just summed up earlier fall in the sign of Scorpio. Now let's dive into the present scorpionic waters so we can effectively navigate through the storms as the tides and emotions rise with the full moon in Taurus on the 8th. As you can see by the chart, on the 1st of November, we're already out of the starting gate with a tense aspect between Venus in Scorpio and Chiron in Aries. As I've mentioned previously, a quincunx, also known as an inconjunct, is a 150-degree aspect and requires some kind of adjustment to bring a harmonic flow of energy into the space. In this case, it directly points to previous woundings around personal relationships and the need to heal our approach to one-on-one entanglements, if we are to facilitate healthy social interactions in the future. This is the running theme throughout the eclipse period since Venus is at the heart of darkness in those 2 weeks. This focus will continue well into 2023, and you can be sure you will have events arising that test your resolve to establish healthy boundaries and reinforce your sense of self-worth in the coming months. While Venus and Chiron are both in signs ruled by Mars, the god of war, you can see he is also at an inconjunct angle with Pluto, the lord of the underworld and the modern ruler of Scorpio. This increases the probability that you will be triggered by an individual or event that echoes a past trauma involving a bully that knocked you off balance and rendered you feeling powerless and on the defensive. The message here is to take your power back and stand your ground without resorting to aggression or hostility. Mars will always point to where the battleground is, likely to land, and he is backtracking in the sign of Gemini for 75 days. So communication is a veritable minefield in that time frame. And to make matters even more confounding, a retrograding Mars is squaring to Neptune for the entire month of November. My advice is to take everything you see, read, or hear with a grain of salt. So long as Mars is retreading in Gemini and the foggy dream landscape of Neptune clouds your capacity to think clearly. This aspect can make one paranoid and suspicious even around loved ones, as it feels like you're in the house of mirrors at the cosmic carnival and you can't find your way out. Also keep in mind that there will be third square between Mars and Neptune going exact in mid-March of 2023. So the sky is being very diligent in getting this message across until we truly integrate as a collective. The cluster of planets that are traveling together through Scorpio will have to navigate through another tense angle known as a sesquiquadrate, which is a semi-square, 45 degrees, at odds with a square, 90 degrees, adding up to a separating energy of 135 degrees. It's an uncomfortable posture, diluting the energies of the planets involved, with a significant emotional overtone in the struggle to resolve differences. It can be compared to a schoolyard situation that has one person hurling an insult, and the response is, "I know you are, but what am I?" There is an adolescent flavor to this standoff that we need to correct in our handling of matters of the heart and our thinking processes, as the order of movement is Venus and Mercury make sesquiquadrates to retrograding Neptune, Jupiter, and Mars on November 3rd and 4th, respectively. This effectively continues to fuel the nervous confrontational energy of November 2nd, when the Sun made a sesquiquadrate to Mars. Adding fuel to the flame, the Sun steps into the same place Venus was on the 1st, and it too quincunxes Chiron, shining light on the woundings Venus highlighted previously. The Moon then conjuncts Chiron in Aries on the 5th, bringing the whole populace into this blaze of light. Are you still with me? It's not over yet, my friends. As on the 6th, Venus squares Saturn while the Sun sesquiquadrates Jupiter. The standoffs and finger-pointing abound all the way to the lunar eclipse on the 8th, with the Sun and Mercury also squaring Saturn, to be matched by a square by Uranus, mirroring and igniting the tension on the opposite side. I have done a full report on the lunar eclipse if you would like a more detailed explanation of this dynamic, as it deserves its own energetic analysis, since this will be felt for months to come, and I don't intend to browbeat you any further at the moment. An important factor leading up to the lunar eclipse that should be noted is that Mercury does a sesquiquadrate to Jupiter on the 7th before it reaches its superior conjunction to the Sun and disappears from the skies as Venus did earlier. We now have both Venus and Mercury in the underworld, to be followed by a turning point in the order of transits, with Mercury taking the lead when the cluster of planets shifts into the sign of Sagittarius. So the cerebral leaps in front of the emotional with the reset energy cleansed and purified by a lunar eclipse that lasts 85 minutes. The best advice I can give is to avoid getting caught in the undertow of the old world being flushed down the drain. Let go and have faith that the new horizon you set your sights on will offer a great reward for your tenacity and courage. We will survive this transition together, so long as we keep our heads and remain compassionate instead of confrontational. Another recommendation I have is to minimize your exposure to social media, which will implode and be redefined as Mars is parked in this playground and he doesn't play nice. Remember, Mars will square Neptune exact on the 19th of this month and then again in mid-March. It's a mud pit when it comes to information you can trust. As your sailboat is tossed and turned in this turbulence, know that Venus will steer us forward by making the first trine to Neptune on the 10th and then Jupiter on the 15th, followed by Mercury and the Sun doing likewise. Jupiter will give you a hearty pat on the back and Neptune will sing you a lullaby in the lagoon. You can see the pattern here of heart, head, and life force working in tandem. The wind in your sails will be further empowered by sextiles to Pluto on the 13th, 14th, and 18th by Venus, Mercury, and the Sun, respectively. Before Mercury takes the lead in Sagittarius, marked by the new moon on November 23rd. Another blessing at this exact point in time is Jupiter stationing direct in its traditional ruling sign of Pisces. Once again, I will have a separate report outlining the effects of the Sagittarius new moon that arrives at 5:57 p.m. EST on the 23rd. This is the safe harbor we can weigh anchor into briefly before we have to deal with some more contentious energy at the close of the month. Opportunities for healing that were thwarted by the tensions at the beginning of the month may materialize in the fires of Sagittarius as the planetary cluster takes turns trining with Chiron. Now Mercury takes the first step on November 25th, followed by Venus and the Sun in December. Having been a competitive archer, I can say from experience, now is the time to loose that arrow you've been pointing skywards. As they say, timing is everything. On the 28th, the Moon, Mars, and Saturn make a grand trine, with both malefics involved. Although this is normally a harmonious configuration, I'd venture to say that the Moon in Libra is attempting to bring balance to two contentious energies. If Brazil is any reflection of celestial influences, I'd use this mundane as an example of this grand trine playing itself out. The population, represented by the Moon, are looking to the military, Mars, to address a situation in government, Saturn, that they feel needs rectifying. This aspect is followed the next day by Mercury opposing Mars and Venus doing likewise on the 30th. Slowly and precisely direct any volatile chemistry in your surroundings. That is the motto for November. At this point, we're all punch drunk and trying to juggle nitro and glycerin personally and collectively. It is imperative to keep our wits sharp and secure the high ground while the parade marches towards the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. To bring you further insight on the personal level, let's do a summary of the effects of the lunar eclipse, Mars retrograde, and Jupiter stationing direct as a counterpoint for each of the rising signs. Aries rising. The eclipse on the 8th of November falls in your 2nd and 8th house axis, and as such, you will be focused primarily on finances. Anticipate the likelihood of having to do some restructuring on the investment front, which involves your partner's income, taxes, and insurance concerns. Mars is messing about in your 3rd house of communication, siblings, and neighbors, So steer clear of gossip and conversations where differences of opinion could get heated, and ignore the dramas unfolding via the internet. Jupiter goes direct in your 12th house of faith and personal beliefs, pointing to trusting your intuition to get you to December. Taurus rising. The eclipse lands in your 1st and 7th house axis of self-image and how you are perceived by others. There may be a sequence of events or a series of conversations that nudge you into re-evaluating your image and how you present yourself to the world. Mars is in your 2nd house of resources squaring Neptune, so double check your ledger and make sure your books are balanced. Saturn in your 10th house will reveal practical solutions in the workplace when it comes to managing your money. And Venus in your 7th house will bring some relief in the event these matters are putting a wedge between you and your loved ones. Jupiter is going direct in your 11th house of groups and organizations, giving additional support and safety in numbers as you build community. Gemini rising. The moon gets blacked out in your 12th house of the subconscious and ancestral patterns you may have learned or have stored in your cellular memory banks based on multi-generational traumas which are in need of clearing. Now would be the time to pay extra attention to your dreams and what messages your subconscious is communicating to alleviate the burdens carried through your bloodlines. With Saturn in your 9th house, this may involve a shift in your belief systems that Saturn, the planet of structure, will support. Mars is backpedaling in your 1st house, so your body might do some complaining to get you to make time for some self-care. Jupiter is stationing in your 10th house of career and reputation, so all that hard work may pay off now, and you'll get the recognition you so richly deserve. Cancer rising. The lunar eclipse blots out the 11th and 5th house axis, so use due diligence when committing to an organization and be thorough in your review of past alliances to determine whether you choose to remain affiliated with them or to cut the ties and explore more appropriate use of your time and energy. Be mindful of any sudden changes in the circumstances where your children's lives are concerned. This could represent the ending of an old cycle, and they could use your support when embarking on a new journey. The same applies to potential romances if you are single and dating, as things could get juicy, but longevity isn't necessarily in the cards. This is further highlighted by Saturn in your 8th house of intimacy. There may be some skeletons in your closet that need to be marched into the daylight regarding fear of being vulnerable. Mars in the 12th house is giving you a hint that there are underlying subconscious patterns playing out which are holding you back from a potential meaningful personal connection. Jupiter goes direct in your 9th house of foreign lands and higher education, perhaps a trip to an exotic destination, or you may end up dedicating yourself to teaching something you have mastered. Leo rising. You're looking at an eclipse in the angular houses of career and home. These can be very challenging placements as an eclipse is expecting you to let go of something, and that may be a job or residence, but that may well be in order to prepare you for something far better and more in alignment with who you are becoming and not who you were. Mars is dancing in your 11th house of assets and community. Surround yourself with positive, like-minded individuals, and the assistance you may need to get you past this eclipse will be forthcoming. Additional support rolls around when Jupiter stations direct in your 8th house and your spouse's income sees an upswing. Those who know your worth will openly express their appreciation. Virgo rising. The moon's light is shadowed in the 3rd and axis, so be prepared with restructuring of ideologies or the possible need to get further courses under your belt if you're looking to advance in your current line of work or train in another vocation altogether. This could also involve emigrating to another country. The 9th house also rules law and order, so there may be a legal issue that demands your attention. This is amplified by Mars retrograding in your 10th house of career. Whatever your decision, you can be sure you'll be backed by your partner as Jupiter is stationing direct in your 7th house of relationships. Libra rising. This eclipse will be hitting your partner's finances, and the blackout will be a direct hit on the house of inheritances and taxes, which will impact your finances overall. Mars is retrograding in your 9th house of belief systems, so the bleed off of this reset could produce a momentary crisis in faith. You are also dealing with a square to Saturn in your 5th house of recreation and romance, so be prepared for adjustments here to bring you back to the balance you need more than any other sign in the zodiac. Stay positive, as Jupiter is going direct in your 6th house of health and daily routines. Perhaps this upheaval will catalyze a new regimen where you make time to exercise, relax, and socialize, especially if you are a workaholic. Scorpio rising. An eclipse in the angular house of self and 7th house of relationships could deliver a new partner. Don't rush into anything just yet, as Saturn in the 4th house is presenting a square to this dynamic, and security for the long term will be something you will have to answer for later if you make any hasty moves now based solely on lust and desire as motivators. Mars is retrograding in your 8th house of other people's money, so if there is an X in the picture, this will factor heavily into how you negotiate a new relationship. The good news is that Jupiter is stationing direct in your 5th house of romance and children. Give yourself permission to play and know that your kids will be okay, if you have any, and the inevitable push-pull of new love interests will not prove traumatic for them when discretion is applied. Sagittarius rising. You have the eclipse in your 6th house of work and health, as well as the 12th house of instincts and secrets. The depths of your psyche will be challenged when it comes to any self-sabotaging behaviors that need to be corrected. And then have this new attitude practically applied to your daily routines. This could prove liberating on all fronts. Mars is retrograding in your 7th house of relationships, so the eclipse and the changes you face will also have implications when it comes to your partnerships. There may be some friction presenting on the part of siblings or neighbors while Saturn squares your 3rd house. Don't be tempted to martyr yourself as Venus is in your 12th house of sacrifice. Instead, look to Jupiter in your 4th house and fortify your home as the fortress and sanctuary to support your growth. Capricorn rising. The lunar eclipse parks in your 5th and 11th house. Perhaps a hobby could become an alternate source of income, and now is the time to commit to this opportunity. This may involve aligning yourself with a new group or collective that supports this endeavor. There may also be a shift in your children, which they will have to navigate, so offer them your wisdom and expertise. Mars is in your 6th house of work, so this may nudge you towards that same goal of shifting time towards another activity that could draw revenue. Your ruler Saturn is firmly planted in your 2nd house, lending structure to this venture. Furthermore, Jupiter is stationing direct in your 3rd house of communication, so start seriously talking about this new income stream possibility. Aquarius rising. You'll be feeling the darkness directly in your home as the eclipse turns off the lights in your 4th house. This restructuring in the household shouldn't alarm you, but it will take some maneuvering to ensure everyone remains calm and feels safe, including yourself. Jupiter stations direct in your 2nd house of finances and will keep you in the black with money flowing in your direction. Mars is retrograding in your 5th house of self-expression, so think about ways you can get your point across without being confrontational and use your creativity as a catalyst. Finally, Pisces rising. The eclipse works its magic in your 3rd house of technology, short trips, and the neighborhood. You might find yourself having to take your car in for repairs, and there may be some friction from people on your block regarding matters affecting local residents. Early education comes into play here, so there may be issues surrounding your children's teachers and the school system. If you have addictions to the internet, it would be advisable to wean yourself slowly from extended exposure that has toxic effects to the psyche, as the dopamine fix from instant gratification has consequences. Mars is retrograding in your 4th house, so be extra careful with expressing your opinions in the home. Jupiter stations in your 1st house, so treat yourself with a makeover or commit to a spa day to wash off the tensions of the month. There you have it, the roundup of November energies. I hope this hasn't been overwhelming and I haven't lost you in the Neptunian fog of escapism, but I'm obligated to give you the full picture so you can act accordingly and strategize from a proactive standpoint. Be of good cheer, as the end of this grueling year is fast approaching, and 2023 will be far less taxing on the nerves. And remember, we're in this together.